Sounds like it's
Good
on.
evening. Good evening. This is Mixed Bag at Belmont Village Story Swap on May 16, 2022. Asaf.
Thank you very much, Linda. My story, I'm not entirely sure where it comes from. I heard it from a rabbi many years ago when I was a kid. And I like playing with stories a little bit, so I played with this one a bit. On the 8th day of creation, God heard a knock on the door. He had a long week previous, and he did have a day to rest, but he was tired. He walks up, he opens the door, and Adam just barges in, lies down on the couch and starts talking. God, I just can't take it anymore. So God sits down on a couch, pulls out his notepad and starts asking, well, Adam, tell me what's going on. Oh, God, why did you give me this complicated thing here that I have to carry around on my shoulders? It's heavy. It thinks too much. It's complicated. It's just, I mean, and she's got one too. And my God, I can't even begin. It's just impossible. And God says, well, Adam, you know, I made you a little bit different. You're capable of a lot of things. Oh God, just leave me alone. Get it off. Just take it out. Because I want to be like the critters. I just want to run around and have fun. And don't give me this. Adam, you know what? Lie down. Close your eyes. Let me tell you a little story. You know, just last week, one of your fellow creatures was here. A little guy, kind of fluffy, white, pudgy little thing, walks in here and says, you know, I mean, Adam, you think that your situation is bad, but he was pretty bruised up. He was broken. He had you have no idea how many injuries he'd been through that day. And he walks in and says, God, I mean, with all due respect, I know you've done a lot of wonderful things for me, but I think you messed things up a little bit because I can't get away from the cat. I'm slow, I'm chubby, I can't jump, I can't run. All I can do is waddle around on these two little scrawny legs. And the cat is everything. The cat is fast, it's got claws, it's got teeth, and it just beats me up every time. I can't get away from it. God, isn't there something you can do? So God takes this little creature, puts him to sleep, pulls on his gloves, does a little work. And the next day, the little creature wakes up back in the garden, raises its head. It's got a little bit of a hangover, but two crazy pains on its shoulders and these huge things. It doesn't know where they came from. And the little creature tries to walk around, and it's even harder than before on those two little scrawny legs, and it's got these two huge weights on its shoulders. And of course, it just goes around the corner, and who does it meet? The cat. Again, and if it was hard to run before, now it's impossible. It just tries and tries and tries, and the cat just whoosh. And the animal just barely gets away with its life, finally manages to limp its way back into God's laboratory and says, God, are you crazy? What have you done to me? I've got these two enormous weights. I mean, it was hard enough to run before. And God says, okay, hold on. Those are not weights. I took some time to put those together. They're not weights. Those are wings. And if you can learn to use them, then you're going to be able to fly. And God turns to Adam and says, Adam, you know, that was just last week. And these gifts that I gave you, these gifts are not meant to be weights. They're meant to be wings. And if you learn to use them, then you'll be able to fly. I hope that wasn't too messy.
If I may, Asaf, such a simple story, but such a powerful message.
Thanks.
Change the negative into the positive. I'm assuming that the wings are the thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And Adam was complaining about the thoughts?
Yeah.
Was that what he was complaining about? At least that was what I understood.
Yeah, the original story was just about the dove and God. And I added the whole thing about Adam. And so I always wonder how to put a story into a story, how to transition from one to the other. It's something I'm still trying to figure out. But yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I think what we consider weights are actually wings for us to use to fly.
Right.
What we really need to do is focus on the thought all the time, our thoughts. I think the biggest enemy is our own mind. The biggest friend can also be our own mind. I think that's something all of us need to focus on. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If anybody has any insights on how to put stories inside stories, I'd love to hear.
Asaf, I loved that story. I have a comment about my listening ears for your story and where my brain was going. And I also have a remark about stories inside stories, because we storytellers have all heard about various, the Chinese culture, when, remember when the festival had a man who is from Oakland, whose last name might be Chin, but I'm not sure. He told box stories.
Charlie Chin?
No, he told box stories. And yours is maybe only one box. The dove was inside the Adam's brain part of the story. But anyway, you had my brain going right to where my brain needs to go for me personally, which is, oh, I think I know where Asaf is headed. He's headed to helping Adam see the pluses of having a brain and the benefits, etc. And you did it. And yes, near the end, I wanted more direction for how you were finding your way back to Adam after talking about the dove. And I did miss the noun dove, but I love
Which I
that. And
left out
thank you so much.
intentionally, but yeah. Yeah, I heard the story originally, like I said, from a rabbi who never said what animal it was, and I rather liked that. I liked the idea of having to figure it out, so I left it out this time as well.
I think so that the listeners can imagine whichever bird they want, because I was imagining a chicken for some reason.
As long as it's a bird. Once it
Yeah.
has wings, I think it's clear that it's a bird. As a kid, I was probably 14, not very young, but I was 14 when I heard it, and I loved as the story developed that when he's getting hints on what animal this was, and then as soon as he said wings, it's like, okay, now we know. But I really liked that.
I have to confess, I thought it was a bat.
A bat. It would have worked as a bat too. Anything that can fly, essentially. Anything that's not all that great at walking.
Right.
But good at flying. Yeah.
I'm glad the story doesn't have a mouse. Not because it's predictable, but because, well, it's typical with a cat. And I'm glad thank you for change. We need so much change. So that's good. Is there someone who would like to tell this next story?
Well, if you don't have anybody else, I can try this one.
Would you like me to record it?
I don't care.
Well, to Anne.
Okay. This actually is a story from Korea. And it goes something like this. The sea has not always been salty. It took a thief to make it that way. You see, once there was a king who owned a small hand grinding mill. And this mill was magic. And it could grind out whatever he wanted to have. So what he wanted was gold. So he would sit down with his mill and he would say, gold, gold, I want more gold. And he would grind and grind away, and all this gold would come tumbling out. And then the king would say, Stop, hand mill, stop. Which in some other folk tales is an important thing to remember to do. Now there was a thief who heard about this magic hand mill, and he wanted it. So one dark night, he was able to sneak in to the palace and steal it. Now, of course, he was afraid of the king's horsemen and the guards and everything else, but he stole it, got out of the palace, and then he was still afraid of being chased. And so he found a rowboat and he jumped into that, stole the boat, and started rowing out to sea. And he rowed and rowed and rowed and rowed. And while he was rowing, he decided that he should decide what he wanted to ask for. He thought, no, gold is not, would not be appropriate, because everybody would wonder where I, a poor beggar, would get gold from. So it's got to be something not so extravagant. It's got to be something that's useful, something I could sell to make some money, because I really want to make some money. And it has to be something that's ordinary, that people would want. What would it be? And he rode and rode. Ah, salt. Everyone needs salt. So quickly he got the hand mill and he started grinding it and grinding it. And sure enough, he had commanded it to say, grind, magic hand mill, grind. And with the money from his salt, I will buy myself some new clothes. Well, the hand mill went on grinding, and sure enough, salt began to pour out of it, and he got happier and happier. And oh, he got up and he was kind of dancing around in the boat, thinking, oh, look at me. I am going to be rich because I have all this salt that I can sell, and because everybody wants salt. And he's standing up in the boat, grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding. And of course, all of a sudden he leans a little bit too much on one side, and he's in the drink. And the hand mill, of course, sinks to the bottom, and he's trying desperately to swim away. But of course, the hand mill is in the bottom of the ocean now, still grinding away salt. And that's why the sea is still salty.
Thank you, Anne.
You're welcome.
Cool.
I have to tell you, I misheard in the beginning, and I thought the ocean was going to lose its salt and that the thief was going to take it.
No, the story starts out that the sea is not salty. I mean, it's salty, but the reason it is now salty and always has been is because of this thief.
Thank you.
The question that comes to me is, what are we grinding in our mills?
Nothing.
Carbon.
Plastic.
Wow.
Plastic, that's what we need, is something to grind up into nothing. It's all the plastic. Ugh. We need a disappearing hand mill that will grind up all the plastic and make it disappear.
Well, my husband Kirk gets something from an entity called Singularity Hub, and the blurb that I saw, I didn't read it, is talking about how that is already beginning to happen, but it's hard for me to believe. And we've already got pieces of plastic that are too small to be filtered through, and anyway, maybe we'll get there. We have to be hopeful.
They're talking about things like that. Ways to convert plastic, ways to convert carbon dioxide. There's a lot of talk. There's also searches for alternatives to plastic that will not be, something that's biodegradable and that kind of thing.
Do you have any hope in that?
I'm wondering more about how long it'll take. Somehow I feel like that's not where the solution's gonna come from.
No,
I think that with or without those technologies, we're still gonna have plenty to worry about.
I agree.
But you know, it will be cool if such things happen.
On Saturday, on Friday, I was able to go to Antioch, where my twin brother lives, and we ate at the Red Lobster, and now I'm segueing to this after dinner because after we ate, there were four of us. We went to the Antioch shore, and we could smell brackish water because this is the part of the Delta in California's Bay Area where we locals realize the fresh water comes in from the rivers and meets with with the water in the bay from the ocean. But it's much more salt water coming through than I know it would vary always based on rainwater. But now with so much rainwater being so low, it's the salt water is having its way, and I started to think, oh, so Anne's story made me think of that, and Terry bringing up the plastics made me think about, well, so what I'm telling you all of this for a reason. And I think my reason is tethered to Asaf's comment about the answer might not be in grinding up plastic, or I'm not sure what Asaf said, but thinking about, I'm told that my body is subtracting water. I think I'm close to 50% carbon. And so perhaps the answer to some of our troubles is more obvious than we think. That the good and the bad are very close together, and we need to respect and observe and keep doing good science, and maybe we'll be able to be more hopeful then.
Linda, what did you say about the body? I'm sorry, it was broken
If
up.
I
I missed that
understand my
story.
reading of carbon correctly, that my body, if I subtract the liquid, the water of the body, which is a lot, right?
Like 70% or
Then
so.
I'm left with close to 50% of being made up of carbon.
Okay.
I obviously should check that before I go further with it, but it's a concept that makes me realize that we are swimming in the good and the bad. And we need to do maybe we need an appointment, like Adam made an appointment upstairs. I'm not getting
Or
religious.
just knock on the door and barge in.
Oh, that's right. He didn't make an appointment. How could I forget? Yeah. Yeah. So, who would like to tell a story now? Rainu.
Can?
Rainu, I keep forgetting to ask people if you would like to be spotlighted.
Not necessary, Linda. You can if you want. I mean, it's either way, it's okay.
Well, everybody but me, I think, likes to in the community. I don't know about tonight on our screen.
I like the spotlight. Although we can pin people if we want to, and then they're basically spotlighted for us.
But I agree with Asaf, but it disregards our Zoom audience. But it is a question I did pose to Renu and not our beloved Zoom audience.
You can spotlight me, Linda.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll change my view to gallery so I can see all of you.
Okay.
So you can still see me, right? And I can see all of you. Okay. So this story that I'm going to share just now is a story that I heard on Saturday from Eric Miller when I attended a workshop. And it's called The Contest at the Inn. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there lived an innkeeper and his wife. And they were blessed with 3 children, 2 sons, and the youngest was a girl. Times were hard. The inn had been doing very well in the years gone by, but now things were a little difficult, and the children were now grown up. And one evening, the innkeeper and his wife sat down and they started to talk. And the innkeeper said, "What do you think, my dear? Who do you think is the best to take over the inn from us? Who'll probably bring in more customers and who probably can make this inn as prosperous as it used to be once upon a time?" And the wife looked at her husband and she said, "Yes, we must decide on which child will do the best job. But how shall we do this? How shall we choose?" And so the two of them, they sat and they thought and they thought and they thought. And then finally she said, "Perhaps we can have a contest. And whoever wins the contest shall be the new innkeeper." Perhaps in those days, sons were preferred, but here they weren't really thinking that the daughter would be part of the contest, but they didn't really rule her out either. And so the next morning, the innkeeper called his 3 children to the huge banquet hall. It was a beautiful space and it had always been full of people with chatter, conversation, music. But everything had now come to more or less a standstill with very few guests at the inn. And so the 3 children came in, the father and the mother stood there, and they faced them and they said, "Well, it's time for us to retire now. And we have decided that one of you must take on the responsibility of running this inn." And the 3 children looked at their parents, wondering what was going to happen. Then the mother said, "We have decided to have a contest. And this is what each of you has to do. You can see this huge space. Each of you must fill it up with something. And there should be no space whatsoever." The 3 children looked at each other, and then the oldest son said, "I'll go first." Now he was a boy who liked to work with stones. And so he brought in lots and lots and lots of stones. And soon the entire banquet hall was covered with stones. The second son came in and had a look, and he found that there were gaps in between those stones. And so he ordered for some sand. And the sand was poured over those stones. And now there was no space left whatsoever. The 2 of them were satisfied. The youngest came in, the daughter, and she had a look and she wasn't very happy. And she had people brought in, and the entire space was cleared. The sand and the stones, everything was removed. People were brought in, everything was cleaned once again. Everything shone, the lights, the chandeliers, the beautiful arched glass. And now the space looked beautiful. She brought in a single candle and lit it. The entire space was filled with light. And then she invited 3 musicians, and they started to play music that was so inviting. It was so beautiful. Those days, hardly anybody had heard music so beautiful. Soon feet were tapping. The few people who were living in the inn came to see what was happening. People were walking along on the street, saw the light, heard the music, and they walked in. And people who were sitting at home in their little cottages having their dinner, they heard it. And they found themselves walking towards that beautiful, beautiful music. And soon the banquet hall was filled with light, with music, with conversation, laughter, and soon there were feet dancing away. And the room, the banquet hall was filled. And the parents, they couldn't believe their eyes. And the next morning, of course, they announced the new innkeeper. Who do you think it was? Yes, no surprise there at all. It was the daughter. And that is where the story ended. And in fact, I wanted to share that after the story, because it was part of a story therapy and psychodrama, they asked each of us to take some element from the story and share what it meant to us. So if there's time, I'd like to share. Else, let's pass on the baton to somebody else if they'd like to share a story. But this is, after all, storytelling and not really story analysis or story therapy.
Yeah.
Did you like the story? And did you feel that, did some part of that story resonate with one of you? I mean, every one of you?
Renu, I'm having trouble unspotlighting you. Somebody give me a hint.
I just have to go to spotlight. Just go to gallery view first, Linda.
Oh,
Then
that's
go to
where
three,
I always forget
go
to
to
go
the
to
three
gallery.
dots.
Bless
Go
your
to the
heart.
3 dots on my
Yeah,
screen
I always forget the gallery part.
and remove the spotlight.
Yeah. I have, Terry, were you going to
I was
say?
just going to say it's a good story, and I liked it, like the way you told it.
Thank you.
Others?
Renu, I wanted to say that in the beginning, it reminded me of a story I heard years ago about filling a jar with stones and then sand and then water.
Right.
And the twist of what the daughter did was really interesting to see it go in a completely different direction. So it was really cool. Where is this story from?
No idea, because I heard it from Eric. He didn't really share the source, because actually this is really not really a storytelling session. It was more like analyzing the story. He told the story, and then I actually added a lot of elements. He just told the bear story. He just said, the innkeeper and his wife, and they had 3 children, and they decided that they wanted one of them to take over. He didn't say that the inn was in trouble or anything like that. He just said the story. He gave us just a brief of the story, and then we were analyzing the story. That was the whole purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Renu, your prompt, I'm not sure about what your prompt was, but my reaction was incremental, which I like. I like staying with the story, and I don't like getting ahead of it or lagging behind. But by the time, as soon as the rocks came, I was getting laden down. And then I realized how effectively those rocks could get even heavier and thicker and space taking upping. And I'm getting more laden down. And I was so laden down that my brain was not able to even have confidence in the next person to come, female, and be able to work with this. And I'd even given up on all of the people who share the planet with us, who would be able to help remove all of the rock and stone. So it was a great experience for my my reaction and observing my reactions. And I'm glad you didn't ask us to do this beforehand, or I would have been over complicating it. I loved that story.
Thank you. But I think that is the whole purpose. Every story, if you really look at it, every fairy tale, if you really start analyzing it like this, the boulders, the sand, the light, everything is symbolic. The boulders are actually the weight that we carry with us, the baggage, the emotional baggage, and the sand, we are constantly adding more to it, because as we go through life, we have new experiences. We are not processing it. We are just adding it on to our emotional, to our brain. And then as we go on, sometimes we do get that little light, that little light, that awakening that we feel from the unconscious to the conscious self. And then sometimes we are able to build upon that light, and then we are able to see what is the real purpose, what is the real self, what is the true self. And then we are able to perhaps help ourselves, because I've always felt that everything starts and ends with the self, that everything we feel that others are doing to us are all projections that we are sending out from our own thoughts, from our own creation. So the whole story, when we actually, each of us gave a perspective, there are about 8 of us in the group, and each of us shared which element of the story. For me, it was the stones. And in fact, when I started talking, it became boulders. Because then Eric, he said, see, from stones have gone to boulders, because boulders are much bigger. I said, yes, the weight I was carrying was much bigger, because for years I'd been carrying and adding more and more, like guilt and regret and anger, frustration, all of those were the boulders that I was carrying. And then that light, I said that light signifies when you start waking up from within, when you realize that all these people you have blamed, I mean, the people around you feel are the boulders in your life for causing this issue, are actually self-created. And the moment you start realizing that is when you can start focusing on the self and changing the direction of your thoughts. That's why your story appealed to me so much, Asaf, because I think all the power lies in our own hands. That the moment we start becoming conscious, what is this thought that is coming to me? Then you realize you have the power to change it. And I have experienced it right through, I think my inner journey started sometime last year, mid last year, and January, I started developing 2 habits. And those 2 habits helped me really through that road trip. I was able to maintain my calmness, my whole attitude was good. I never let anything put me down. There were physical challenges of actually climbing that mountain. And there's so many other challenges, when you're going on a road trip, you see so many drivers misbehaving, you see so many things happening, we didn't get proper food. But everything changed because my perspective changed. And I found that, I really, really found it. I'm so now passionate about talking to people and helping them because I feel all of us need that help. All of us need it because stories are the only way. Stories are nothing but, I think, have been created by people over a period of time to help each other connect and to understand that all of us are just one soul, a universal consciousness. I think I very much believe in it. I think because that is why we love stories. We listen to stories with so much passion because it connects us emotionally. And one person rightly said that depression doesn't come overnight. It's over the years because we address our physical issues immediately. We have a headache, we look after it. We have something breaks in our arm, we fix it. But when something emotional trauma happens, we hide it because we don't want to talk about it. We don't even know how to express it. From childhood, we carry it. And as we carry it, the brain somehow is not able to take it anymore. And that is when we fall into that darkness. Many people are facing depression now, and they're all going for therapy. But like Eric and his wife confirmed, this shouldn't be recorded actually, I'm sorry. But nobody can help. Only you can help yourself. But talking definitely helps. Linda, you're on mute.
Renu, what you were talking about, if a barrel could hold brilliance, your barrel would be completely full. Because the brilliance of what you just said is wide and deep, tall and expansive. There's a secret, perhaps, and you didn't reveal it because when the mind forgets and the perspective, perception, I forget the noun you used for attitude or for approach, but if it wanes, there is the opportunity, not the boulder, not the mountain, but the opportunity.
Yes. I don't know how many of you have read Rhonda Byrne's The Secret.
Rhonda,
Have you read that book, The Secret? It's called The Secret.
I've
The book.
heard
Oh,
about
yes.
it.
So there it says very clearly,
Yes.
that this is something everybody knows, but probably she has put it into words that nobody's really ever thought of. But it just says that our thoughts are powerful and that we can make something manifest itself if you really, really want it. And I have experienced it many times. Simple things, small things, big things, I have experienced. And I think we do have that power. We just need to practice it.
there must be many books called The Secret. Tell me again another reference.
The Secret. You will find it on the net for sure. The Secret. Rhonda Byrne. I think that's her name. I will just give me a minute. I'll put it in chat, Linda. 1 second. Give me a second.
So while Renu puts that in chat, unless others have comments for Renu, I will ask who would like to tell next. Terry?
Yeah, I got a short story. I don't know if I've told this before at Belmont, but I just jumped to mind. And it comes
Is it all
to,
right, Terry? Oh, excuse me. Is it all right if I spotlight you, or would you
sure,
rather not?
absolutely, spotlight,
Okay.
record and erase, do whatever you want.
Uh-huh.
I had the really good fortune of having had 4 uncles in my life, and I loved each one of them to one degree or another. They all had really positive, strong influence on how I went on to grow up as a man. This story is about my Uncle Neil, who was one of my favorites of the 4. Um, and the time when I had a chance to drive with him from um, Sanibel Island in Florida to Black Mountain, North Carolina. And it was a time when we, as uncle and nephew, got to bond with each other for the first time. I was probably 10 years old at the time and very impressionable. And I was given the opportunity of taking this drive with him in his pride and joy, a car that he had just purchased, his brand new bright green 1947 Hudson Hornet. My mom and dad were in their car behind us as we left the island and started north. And I watched the speedometer on his car. It's just my Uncle Neil and me, and I'm watching the speedometer climb as he shifted expertly through all the gears and then dropped it into a 4th one, which he called overdrive, which I'd never seen on any car before. And soon we were going, and my parents' car just disappeared in the rearview mirrors. I don't know, didn't know how far behind me they were. Hope it wasn't too far. And we're whizzing along, and that engine seemed to hum and purr as the speed increased. And I looked over at my Uncle Neil. He was clearly enjoying and relishing in the moment. I think it was much about showing his young nephew, his pride in this car, but it was also letting me know that I was riding in the fastest automobile transportation methods known to man at that time. And he was very careful to explain to me about this car. And I was fascinated by all the buttons and knobs and dials on it. And I saw one that had a big red dot on it. So my little curious hand went out to touch this, and my hand got closer and closer and closer, and said, "Stop! Don't touch that knob, ever!" I withdrew my hand and sat there, and worrying about what I'd done. I was thoroughly convinced if I'd touched it, I might have ruined his car or sent it careening off the highway off into the ditches that were filled with crocodiles and water moccasins, I was sure of. And he let me sit there uncomfortably for a long, long time. And then he looked at me with a totally deadpan face and he said, "We don't have flight clearance from the tower. If you press that, we're only cleared for road travel on this trip. If you touch or pull that knob, airfoils extend out of the chassis, and this car transforms into what the FAA classifies as an airplane. And with the foils extended, Terry, we would lift off the road approximately 10 to 12 feet, and our speed would increase to at least the top of the speedometer, 140 miles an hour. And we'd arrive in Black Mountain long before your mother and father ever got out of the state of Florida." I thought about that for a long time, and I must have looked at him somewhat dubiously because he added, "You don't think that I would just drive any car, do you, Terry? That I'd be content with a car just because it has the most powerful engine that was ever built? The first car with overdrive, with aerodynamic design. This isn't just an automobile, Terry. This is a Hudson Hornet. And Hornets fly, don't they?" He was so adamant and passionate about it that my skepticism vanished instantly, and I no longer doubted that a flying car was indeed possible and well within the reach of one red button to be possible. Now, this was a brilliant strategy on his part. I mean, my chance of, turning into a stereotypical pesky kid, constantly saying, "Are we there yet? And how soon will we get there?" The long trip from Florida to North Carolina just whizzed by, I'm sure for both of us, by my constant fascination with that red knob and the idea that at any moment we could leave the ground and soar above all the ordinary and mundane traffic below. The hours and miles literally flew by. Now, when I was about 12 years old, he allowed me to drive that car around the grounds of my great aunt's estate in Black Mountain, North Carolina. I toured the many twisting gravel roads of her 80-acre property alone by myself, my feet barely able to reach the pedals and barely able to see above the dash. I used a big pillow to get myself up there. My first automobile solo. And I did so with great care and precision, never taking it out of second gear. And even though there was rarely any traffic on those private roads, I always came to a full stop at every intersection. Here I was, the pilot, solo in command of my car/aircraft. And I'm pretty sure I know what you're thinking now, and I admit that I was sorely tempted, but I never once touched that red knob. Even today, I often wonder what that red knob actually did. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Wow. I've heard that, and I really enjoyed tonight's as much as ever.
Oh, you've heard it, Linda. I thought maybe I might have told it to you.
No, it is another.
I heard it too, Terry, and such a beautiful story. It stayed with me such a long time. I thought, what a wonderful person your uncle must have been. It was your uncle, right? Wasn't it your uncle who took you for that drive?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I still remember that story. I still remember it. And I think he was a wonderful person to tell you such a story, about the car. I think that was really good. I think I mentioned that the first time when you shared it. I don't know where, probably at the Contra Costa Tail Spinners, or was it here? I don't remember. But this was last year.
Well, thank you for listening again.
Oh, it was beautiful. I really liked it. Just for 2 seconds, I had to go away to see my husband off. He was leaving for work. I just went for 2 minutes and came back.
On time here. Ed, do you know if you want to tell tonight? Oh, Ed's not here yet.
He was there a little while ago.
Well, he may be there.
He was here.
I see his phone.
His camera off. He might be there. If he can hear us, he might join us.
Right. Terry, I wasn't ready for there to be intersections. I thought you were still on your relative's property, and I thought you were on like gravel roads, and it never occurred to me that you were coming to non-relative land. So I needed, maybe it was my ears, I needed help getting to the fact that you're 14 and you're already coming to intersections.
Well, the first part of the story is the trip from Sanibel Island in Florida to North Carolina with my uncle. And that was the first time we sort of bonded together. And then there was a break there. And I said, when I think it was 14 or 12, I can't remember, I think it was 12, he allowed me to drive it on my great aunt's estate in North Carolina, in Black Mountain. And maybe didn't make that clear that there was.
No, you did, but I heard the word
You did.
intersection once you were on the estate, and that confused me.
Yeah.
But maybe estates have intersections.
Well, it was an 80-acre piece of property, so it did have a lot of circling places where there were crossroads, and they were all gravel. The whole estate was gravel roads, but yeah, that may be confusing.
No, I loved it. Ed, I see you're back. If you are wanting to tell, now would be a good time to do it.
All right.
Would you like me to spotlight you?
I would rather do it at a good time than a bad time.
Oh.
Yeah, spotlight me if you'd like.
Pardon?
Yeah, go ahead and spotlight me.
Very good.
There we go. Pardon me. This is a story of Glaucus. Glaucus was one of the gods that the Romans used to talk about back in the old Roman days. But he wasn't always a god. He started out just as mortal as any of us. He was a fisher. And every morning he would go down to the edge of the ocean and he would cast his nets out onto the water and pull in as many fish as landed in those nets. Sometimes he would go down to the edge of the water and he would cast his nets and play flamenco music. But that's a different story for a different time. This one particular day, he cast his nets on the water and he pulled them in and it was just full of fish. And when he pulled the net up on the land and he opened it up so the fish could be free, they started to leap and fly just like they do in the water. They started to squirm about like they were swimming in the water. And they squirmed and they swam across the sand until they swam right back into the ocean. Glaucus couldn't believe his eyes. He didn't know what was going on. Was some god playing a trick on him? Was it something about the grass? That part of the beach? Bent down and he took a bite of a leaf of grass. And no sooner did the bitter taste of that blade of grass touch his tongue than a great quiver came over his body. And his heart started to pound in his chest. And he knew that something was going to happen. And he knew that he couldn't resist it. And he just jumped up on his feet and said, "Goodbye," and jumped into the ocean. And he fell all the way down to the bottom of the ocean. And to his amazement, he could still breathe, even under the water. All the way down to the bottom of the ocean, he could still breathe. And all the gods of the ocean came from all around the world, wherever there were seas, and they swam around him, and they chanted chants 9 times and 20 to get all the mortality out of his system. And then they poured over his head the water of 100 rivers. And then everything went black for Glaucus. He lost all consciousness. And when he came to, everything was different. His heart was strong. His heart was pounding in his chest. His eyes could see all the way to the other side of the ocean. His whole body was quivering. And he knew he wasn't a mortal anymore. He had turned into a god. His feet closed together and fused till they looked like the fins of a fish. And he swam around the waters. He was a whole new person. He wasn't even a person, he was a god. Maybe the greatest of all the ocean gods, stronger and mightier than any of the others. And he came up on land, and he looked back and forth, and there, running across the sea, just as naked as the day she was born, was the beautiful Scylla. And she was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen in his life. He fell in love with her, and he approached her and tried to tell her, "You've got to come with me. I have to live with you. You're my love." But she didn't know what to make of him. Was he a god? Was he a man? Was he a monster? She had never seen anybody like this before, with blue skin and scales all up and down his arms. And she ran away from him to the top of a high cliff, and she looked at him from above the cliff, and he couldn't believe that Scylla would run away from him. His heart was broken. What's the point of being a god if I can't win Scylla's love? Broken-hearted, disappointed, he jumped back into the water, and he swam away in the direction of Circe's palace. Circe the sorcerer, who knew all the herbs and all the potions and all the magic chants. If there was anyone who could make Scylla fall in love with him, it would be Circe. He told his story to Circe. He pulled out his heart to Circe. But she said, "My friend, You are pursuing the wrong prey. If she doesn't love you, I think she doesn't deserve you, because I don't know who wouldn't love you. There is one who does love you and who does deserve you, and you would be much wiser to pursue that prey. And she's standing right in front of you. Well, Circe's love might have been strong, but it wasn't strong enough to win over Glaucus. He said, no, nothing can come between me and Scylla. Even if Scylla doesn't want me, she's the only one for me. And it made Circe so mad to know that Glaucus would not fall in love with her, that she gathered up all the poisonous waters from the bottom of the ocean, and she ran to the pool where she knew that Scylla would stop and rest herself on a hot day. And she poured all the poisonous water into that pool. And she said over chants 9 times and 20, all kinds of evil chants that would bring Scylla down when she came there. And in time she did. It was a hot day, and she came down to the pool, and she dipped her toes in so she could cool down. And no sooner had she submerged waist deep into that water, but her whole body started to change. She heard the sound of barking. She didn't know where it was coming from, but she looked down and she saw that her calves were turning into dogs, their mouths wide open, baring their vicious teeth. And there were dogs growing out of her thighs, growling and snarling. And a monster had come and wrapped himself around her waist and was crawling up her body. She didn't know what to do. She dove into the waters and she swam away as fast as she could. Circe, seeing that Scylla had not given in to her magic, had in fact become a hideous beast, but had managed to swim away nonetheless. She couldn't take her anger out on Glaucus. Glaucus was a god, and she wouldn't want to. She loved him. So she went and she robbed Ulysses of all of his men, and she would have destroyed the whole Trojan fleet. But before she could get that far, she was turned into a huge rock. And that rock stands at that point on the beach to this very day, and it is the terror of any sailor who tries to pass there.
Oh my. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. That's the story.
Is it titled Gracchus?
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah, in the book there are 2 parts of it. One is called The Story of Glaucus, and the other might just be called The Story of Glaucus Continued. It's from Ovid's Metamorphoses, which has a lot of Roman myths in it, and they're all just kind of strung together.
I've heard of Scylla and never heard about that rock. It kind of brings a whole other perspective to it.
What had you heard about her before?
Scylla?
What had you heard about her before?
It's been a very long time. I think that I read about Scylla in Edith Hamilton has a book called Mythology.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't remember much. I just remember the name, and I remember that she attacked Ulysses. But there was a story about how she became a monster and that she was originally a woman, but I don't remember other than that.
That's the first time I've ever told it out loud, so thank you for your indulgence.
Thanks for telling.
Oh. Ed, thank you especially for going to those dark places, fierce places, beyond strong places that could go bad at any second, any direction. Wow.
With your legs turning into wild dogs.
Mm.
I appreciated your ed affect, which is low in a good way, because I didn't need any extra energy for calves turning into large dogs. That was ample and effective, especially for a first telling. Wow. How are we doing on time? I can read the clock, but I don't know if anyone wants to tell another story or not.
I think I'm gonna head out.
I'm glad you could stay this long. It's great.
Yeah, good to see you all.
It's nice to see you. Go in health.
Yeah. Everybody have a good month. I'll be in Israel next month, but I wish you all.
Oh, have a wonderful time.
Thank you.
What part will you be in?
Good night, everyone, and good morning to Rain. Huh?
Yeah.
What part of Israel will you be in?
Good night.
My family lives mostly up north, not too far from Haifa.
Ah,
We're still recording all this.
Oh, thank you.